Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardina. I am so excited for this week's episode. In fact, I've been talking to Ashley for some time now, really wanting her to come onto the podcast. She's doing awesome things in Yavapai County in Arizona. She could talk more about that. But specifically, this is going to be kind of jumping many hoops here. Nat Sellers, who runs the Preparedness Works podcast and is also one of our instructors at DyPop, and he's a former combat medic and a bunch of cool things. He told me he's a big social media guy, so check out Preparedness Guy on Instagram and a bunch of other places. But we were talking about social media and why social media was so important and how we need to update for current trends and a bunch of other stuff. And he was like, hey, you really got to check out the Yavapai account. And I was like, what? And I didn't even know what Yavapai was. I was totally out of the loop, but he connected me to her. Or at least their account, their official account. And I started going through all their content, and I was totally impressed. And then I got to meet Ashley and saw some of the work she was doing as an emergency manager and was totally blown away. This is just a highlights that there's so many good emergency managers around the country who are doing cool things. Sometimes we know about them, sometimes we don't. But the most important thing is word of mouth. Nat Sellers, who lives in Virginia, comes out to a training in Atlanta, who tells me about this social media account, who gets connected. And, quite frankly, it's impressive to see people everywhere trying to do good things. And the more I've gotten to know Ashley, the more I've been impressed with how she attacks emergency management and beyond. And so I wanted to bring her on. So with a very long introduction, I just want to say, Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. That was quite the intro. Thank you.
Well, you're pretty popular with my team, whether they work for me or they're contractors or whoever. We like people who are willing to do good things for the right reason, and more importantly, trying new things. I brought up the social media thing. I'm going to be hitting that pretty hard because I care about that. I care about reaching out to people. What I have found in emergency management is, especially emergency management, more than other public safety fields, is that we're not willing to do clever things. And you're willing to do clever things on social media and to do outreach. Can you kind of just give your background of why that was important to you and your approach to doing outreach?
So I think a big part of that is honestly my generation. I'm a millennial through and through, although there are some parts of me that are a little bit old school with that. But we have to really make sure that we are utilizing every channel we can to connect with our communities. And social media, good, bad, or indifferent, is a huge mechanism that is being used to communicate information. I mean, honestly, how often are we going to our phones, our Facebook or X feeds, to find out what is going on in our communities, what the news is? And so recognizing that in this day and age was a huge catalyst for us to make sure that we're using social media. And so I came from 911 dispatch. That was my previous life. And that was a huge thing for me. Was we wanted to have that connection with our residents and be able to communicate that. And we didn't have that ability when I was in 911. So moving over to emergency management, I had that ability and that freedom to start using and leveraging our social media. So that was like, oh, now I've got the ability to drive the car, so to speak. Well, let me kind of explore and experiment with what may or may not work. And so I just kind of dove in to try to figure out what would work. Yavapai County, we're a little bit older, but they still use social media just as much. And that's kind of where we started with.
The L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. So I want to keep hitting on social media, but I'm going to go on like a really big tangent based off of something you just said real fast. Lately, I've been getting to know a lot of emergency managers who used to be dispatchers. Kristen Capps Jones, she lives here in St. Louis. She's one of them. I can think of a few other people. I don't know their individual's name, but this amazing person who helped out the mass shooting in Michigan a little while ago. These people are phenomenal emergency managers. Do you find that in itself, dispatch prepares you for emergency management, or is it correlation without causation kind of thing?
So I think it does. And maybe I am a little bit biased, but what's kind of ironic with that was I had originally applied for emergency management or a position in emergency management back in 2018 and had been told no because I didn't have the experience. And I had just assumed that, oh man, I had kind of typecast myself as a dispatcher. My skills and my experience would never translate to anything else. I would never be anything but a dispatcher, which anyone in dispatch knows that's you never tell that to a dispatcher. You never say you're just a dispatcher. But as I've come over to emergency management, I feel like that is not the case at all. There's so many similarities in addition to, especially if you're a multidiscipline dispatcher. I mean, I was only law enforcement, but the multitasking, the dealing with the public, dealing with resources, and having to think not just a couple steps ahead, but 10 steps ahead, and thinking about that big picture, you get into that mindset that we often use in emergency management. So I think it really does help you in this field, and I think it's really helped me in my position. So I would encourage anyone in dispatch to definitely think about emergency management and not just let that mindset of I'm only a dispatcher stop them. But
yeah, I started pushing maybe about a year and a half ago when we talk about like emergency services. We always say fire, police, EMS. I've been trying to drive emergency management for that. I started making sure I was calling out dispatchers. Again, from a data science standpoint, 3 or 4 touch points really isn't great data. But, so far 100%. And, your comments add a lot of confidence to that as well. The idea of thinking 10 steps ahead, totally emergency management, the ability to stay cool and calm while people are screaming at you for whatever reason on the other end is a great skill set to learn. So I echo what you're saying. If you're a dispatcher and you're listening right now, thinking about emergency management is maybe the next step in the career, and good shout out there. Going back to the social media, what I find with social media content, especially from official public safety and emergency management, is there's a huge fear or pushback from senior leadership that you can't do anything fun. Like you can't add brevity, or you can't add, I'm at the point where I want to mock people for not preparing, right? Like I'm like all the way to the dark side at this point, but I'm not in a public, realm anymore. But I do see it from other groups. I see it from military. I see it from fire and police, especially. What gave you not just the confidence to be able to move forward, but how did you develop a culture where you were able to build within your own team, like, hey, let her do what she wants? You went from somebody who didn't get the job to all the way through, let her run her own thing. How did you work that?
I was very fortunate, and when I started going for the social media, I kind of had that freedom as it was, but then it was figuring out what the environment was with our citizens, and then also studying other accounts and what do people like. People like to laugh. People like the satire. People like the memes. People like anything that's really funny. And so that's where we leaned more heavily into the poking of fun and creating the funnier content that was just poking fun at people, doing the panic buying for a snowstorm or whatever it might be, and going that route rather than just, there's a time and a place when we have to be serious and we have to post just information straightforward. But it was really about finding what worked best for us in our community and seeing what was working in other communities, like with Pennsylvania Emergency Management. They've got good content on there, as well as South Carolina, and seeing what other areas were having success and trying to replicate some of those within our own community. And when we started seeing some of those areas of success, we just kind of ran with it, and it helped just continue to reaffirm the route we were going. I'm not going to lie, it also really, really helps that we don't have strict social media policies right now. Because if agencies or government places have those really strict social media policies that say that you won't do that, which is unfortunate because that's not what citizens want. I think citizens and communities want to see that these agencies, whether it be emergency management or law enforcement, fire, whomever it is, that humans, and that they laugh and they have fun, and that there's a human element to all of us, and that's what they want to see. So I think that allows us to showcase that and share information in a way that will actually resonate with them, and hopefully
I feel like gosh, man, you just hit on so many different areas, not just on social media, but marketing as an industry, our own branding, all that stuff. I like to tell people, if like, and we write plans, obviously, for everybody, including universities. The reason why I call it universities is because the deans and the presidents are used to getting like magazines on, reports, whether it's innovative something or an article. And then emergency management presents them, 8.5 by 11 Times New Roman 12 white paper, black ink, and it's boring. They don't want to look at it. And then they're surprised that nobody really reads it. And then we go in there and we add images and we add data and we add all these extra things, and we include their quotes. Like we do the interviews and we actually put the quote in there. And so it keeps them wanting to go through all the way through the end of the plan because there's something to look at. And I think I think we have a missed opportunity for an industry who says communications is on every single after action. We're actually very poor at professional communications. And the fact that you're hitting on that is so huge. Ultimately, if people, your constituents or whoever, don't want to look at it, they're not going to watch. They're not going to learn. They're not going to do something. The 2 or 3 most popular posts I can think of that we've done on our side, and I'd love to hear what your most popular are. One was Ron White. We put it on Instagram. The clip of him talking about the guy tie himself up to a pole in a hurricane, and he's like, "It's not the wind that will kill you; it's the Volvo that's coming at you." And that got shared 1 million times, right? And so, hey, hurricane preparedness using a comedian's skit, fantastic. The other 2, one was it was a clip from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and we put like the different emergency services with each person, and we were just trying to throw some humor at how emergency services look at each other. At the same time, we were the Trojan horse of that was that emergency management is part of emergency services, and so we put the different hats on there, and that was really popular. And then the last one was actually it was another hurricane one, but it was for DyPop training. We took the clip from A Knight's Tale. You can see a trend here. Other people's content that we repurpose. And have you ever seen A Knight's Tale?
Yep.
Okay, it's one of my favorite movies, in full disclosure. But there's a clip where I the announcer, I didn't know what his character's name is. He gets up and he goes, for everybody who else is not in the stands or not sitting in a cushioned seat, and he's talking to the normal people. We did this clip about coming to DyPop during hurricane season, and we said, for everybody else who's not responding to a hurricane, because, you know, we always think that the entire country responds or something, but those clips are humorous, they're fun, but there's underlining tones, and we get tons of shares and content off of it. What are some of the most successful campaigns that you've done?
So one of the things that we have done, which actually started from a really creepy drawing that one of my team members created, we have the Aware Bear.
Aware Bear?
Yeah, and because we were sitting around, probably about 2 years ago now, trying to figure out of some sort of marketing tool of sorts that we could have and take to events. And someone drew on the whiteboard like the Aware Bear. The Aware Bear don't care because he's prepared. And it's the creepiest drawing because art is not his forte. But I was at a store one day and I came across a Squishmallow that looked like a much cuter version of that. And so I bought a bunch of those and I took them back to the office, and the Aware Bear was born. And so now we have these little stuffed animals that we take to events, and we put our hat on them. And so he is our little campaign of sorts. He is our preparedness creature that we'll put in videos and reels and little montages of sorts to be able to be our conduit of messaging, so to speak.
That's awesome.
So we've had some hits and misses with the Aware Bear, but I'd say the launch of him was relatively successful for us. We've also had some decent success with just overall poking fun at anytime we have a winter storm. We'll put some like coming soon to a street near you, and we'll just put like a bunch of snow, like the winter, and people will love that. And then sometimes just sharing the straight information about a couple of years ago, there was the one where if you get lost, change your voicemail to where you are. And it's like, no, that's not really a practical thing for you to do. Just call or text 911. That's a much better thing for you to do.
Seriously.
So we did an information post on that, and that actually did really, really well. Shockingly, that was just a normal post. But that one I remember because I think that was my first post that ever went really far. And got shared a lot, but those are the ones that immediately cross my mind. So,
Aware Bear. I like the. I wonder how many people are going to steal that now. If you had to choose an animal for emergency management, would it be a bear? If you had to choose a true mascot for EM.
I mean, they hibernate and they do all the preparation type stuff.
Yeah, we're asleep half the time.
Yes, but in a way, sometimes I feel like we're a little bit more badger-like. But
badger-like? Why badger?
Because we have to be a little bit aggressive sometimes. Fight for why emergency management is important, and kind of get in there and fight for our seat at the table. Well, granted, maybe we're not aggressive, but we have to be.
Badgers are super aggressive.
They are super aggressive. So it's like a ninja aggression.
Yeah, that's how I kind of feel about orcas, to be honest. Like because of like Free Willy, I always told people my spirit animal is an orca because people think they're really fun, but deep down inside they're the apex predator.
That's a really good one.
Yeah. Sorry, it's totally random, and people are gonna be like, "What?" So your episode, we're recording today. The election is tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's nuts. We are in.
Yeah.
I had, and for everybody who listens in, I'm sure they're well aware of now. We had a podcast, or we had a dynamic populations training scheduled in October, and we had to push that to January for a lot of reasons, but mostly because people were actually, funny enough, responding to hurricanes. And we had one instructor, her home got impacted by the hurricane, and luckily she's fine. But one of the big reasons people weren't able to come to our training is because they said, "Hey, I'm prepping for the election." And I thought that was fascinating. A lot of law enforcement couldn't come. A lot of emergency management couldn't come. Is Yavapai, because it's in Arizona, having to do a lot of stuff? Like, where are you guys at from the EM perspective of election?
So our EOC will be active in support of the election. I wouldn't necessarily say it's directly related to it being the 2024 general election. We just, into the last election, that was more of a local thing. We saw an opportunity that we could partner with our elections department and support them with a couple of things and start strengthening those ties across county departments. And we just continued that trend moving forward. I also had the opportunity to have some correspondence with our county recorder and provide some feedback of when the Secretary of State was asking for who should they invite to a state exercise. I'm like, well, I strongly advocate for emergency managers to be looped in, and I believe others did the same. And so we've been seeing a larger trend, at least here in Arizona, where emergency management has been invited to that table, which they absolutely should be.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're seeing that more and more, and I'm just glad that we've been a part of that conversation here locally for a little bit, and we're just continuing that trend going into this election. Yavapai County, it's Yavapai County. I know that doesn't mean a lot to other folks, but we tend to see voting trends really go one way. I don't anticipate a lot of craziness in our county, but it is also Arizona, so that doesn't mean that we may not need to support other parts of the state. Who knows?
Sure.
But we definitely will be active. There's going to be larger cooperation calls and such that we'll be participating in, so that way we're good neighbors. But just one of those things that we wanted to be good neighbors to our fellow county department, and be able to be there to support with small things, whether it be phone banks to answer just general questions, because everyone has the same issues with staffing and making sure they have enough people to answer simple questions like where's the closest voting center and all that good stuff.
I just had a great social media idea. General questions for the general election. But it was really fascinating to me yesterday. A guy came over to my house. Big shout out to Jake. And he said, I'm just hoping that he's not in our field at all. Like he's just, he runs his own small business. And he said, whatever the results are, I hope it's over on Tuesday night. And I could tell that he was honestly concerned. And I just hope that you have the most boring day tomorrow. I hope when this podcast comes out, we don't have to make clips of like, hey, we predicted this and this happened. But it just showed that there's a lot of tension around different things right now. And I just hope that, everybody who's listening now, I guess this would be Tuesday, that everybody has a very boring day. And I hope a lot of the tensions, whatever the results are, we just kind of get back to normal. So many just normal, good people out there. The extremists are always very loud, and just move on from there. But it just showed that you as a county, we had a conversation 2 months ago, and I was blown away by the amount of things that you're managing. Everything for your county. You're also supporting your state. You're also dealing with the election. You're doing so many things. And in my history, or at least in my personal opinion, emergency managers at the county level always have to do the most. There's so many moving parts. How do you, if you're going to be talking to other emergency managers out there, how do you manage that? Like, how do you separate priority? Because not everything can be priority one.
I mean, I guess this is where I go back to my dispatch life. You assess the information as you have it, and then you execute. There's always going to be the opportunity in this field where something is going to come in, and you may have been working on project A, and then all of a sudden you have a fire come in and all your plans are derailed. That is not your objective. We had that earlier in the year where we had like our year planned out, and then we had public safety power shutoffs get dropped in our lap, and all our plans got derailed. So we had to start rearrange what our priorities were. And that's just really the name of the game. So I think as much as we're planners and we organize, we plan, and we do all of that, we also have to maintain a sense of rigid flexibility and the ability to pivot as necessary. Because if you have to complete task A before you get to task B, I think you will be driven absolutely bonkers in this field. That's just the name of it. Is we start on task A and then we will pivot. It sucks sometimes because projects will be still left on the back burner that we know we have to get done, but it's the unfortunate nature. I think a lot of us across the nation in emergency management feel with the lack of funding, lack of staffing, where we have so many things that we need to accomplish, so many things that we want to accomplish that are the not necessarily need to have, but we want to do, that we will eventually get to, but we have to prioritize and execute our tasks appropriately, depending on what the needs are at that point in time.
Hey, we just want to do a quick pause X to thank all of our sponsors with the Readiness Lab Podcast Network, L3 Harris, Forerunner, C. Bernie World, HQE Systems, Yavapai Response Training Center, Impulse, Doberman Emergency Management, and especially all of you who subscribe to the TRL Insider program and who are listening to this episode right now. Thank you so much for your support. Let's jump back in. Yeah, that's a great call out. Like the scope does seem forever widening. And sometimes I think going back to that communications problem, I don't think emergency managers are great personal advocates of saying I can't do something or I won't do something until I get X. And I think part of it comes down to essentially emergency management at its very core is humanitarian. A lot of really great people just care about other people and they're very passionate. And so the idea of saying no or pushing back on something feels like you're not moving the forward of keeping people safe. But the reality is, like every other field, from doctors to accountants to you name it, engineers, despite priorities, they have to be able to advocate for themselves. And you're calling that out. There are a lot of really clever ways to get around that. Between using interns and colleges and other emergency managers in your region and stuff like that, including contractors. I'm going to give a call out, and also I'm going to try to dance this tightrope. I have heard, because I'm a contractor, I worked with this other company, so you're going to be like them too. Like, not all emergency managers are the same quality. Not all contractors are the same quality. One of the largest contractors I know, their founder just went on to social media, speaking of social media, and said, I care so much about people who are impacted by the hurricanes that if you like my post, I will donate $1 for every like and share. And then they made a second post of saying, hey, we got so many likes and shares that we decided to donate X amount of money. But then they noted in that same post, but we had something like 40,000 impressions, but only this many people liked the post. And they only donated for the likes. And I was like, do you actually care? And so whether you're a county EM or you're somebody else listening to them, allow whatever organization you work with, that organization to represent themselves. Whether it's college students coming in, if you had a bad experience, allow new college students to work with you. If you've worked with a contractor and you've had a poor experience, allow other people to work with you. And the same thing with going back all the way through communications and trying new things. If you've had a post that epically failed, it doesn't necessarily mean that social media is bad. I'm trying to help people connect the dots here a little bit, but my perspective is just take people at face value. And if you have a negative experience in something, that doesn't mean everything is bad. Do you have the same thought, or do you have different thoughts? What is your opinion?
Absolutely. And that's actually something that we've been discussing. And so in the aftermath of the hurricanes, the devastation that we've seen the the very negative side of social media and the mal, and disinformation that can happen as a result of social media. And it's a very scary thing. And for some people, it could be turn off all the comments, don't allow the comments, or maybe just don't use social media. And I can see why people can look at those types of situations and it just be a lot of negative takeaways. But it's a conversation that we've had with our local PIOs. It's a conversation that we've had internally of how can we prevent what we saw with the social media information and this devastation, because that is a beast in and of itself. And it's not to say that, I don't honestly know what those local EMs were doing. So I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback, but just looking at the FEMA kind of component, and then, what can we make sure that we're doing at home? It's really about building that social capital, regardless, and making sure that our citizens here know who we are and that we're here regardless of all the other noise. So that way, if something else happens, if something pops up and they start seeing some of these comments that might be negative or derogatory, they'll be like, that doesn't sound like our EM, that doesn't sound like our county government, and start to call it out. And so that way we can have that information on the front of any sort of incident. Granted, I think in these large scale incidents, that's going to be very minor, because those things get so big so fast and you have so many people having comments and weighing in on it. But that's, some of the conversations that we've had of how it can look scary, but they're just because it one bad thing happens, it doesn't negate all the good that it can do.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of good things that can come of it.
And this is a perfect example, right? You are so good, I'm so bad, and that doesn't negate how great this episode is, right? Seriously. The reality is, like, in emergency management, because the scope is always changing, we have to get enough data points to realize if something's good or not. And the negativity can come from seemingly like a lack of results, or it can come from immediate feedback. Sometimes you have to let something mature a little bit. And our industry in itself needs to mature enough to where we can start advocating for ourselves, for this or that. And I do think outreach is one of the most important and critical things we can do. Outreach to the community, outreach to our stakeholders. And there's lots of ways to do that. Social media is one way to do it. I think staying positive is incredibly important. And being brave enough to call out something that doesn't represent us well. I will, for example, that comment about the post on like and share for $1. I don't think that represents EM very well. And at the same time, I don't need to go on social media and add to the algorithm. I think a lot of people miss this, where they feel like the need to comment on every negative post too. And you're like, well, you're just adding to it. One of my podcasters, he got a huge amount, he had like over 1 million views with a ton of comments, but like the first 50,000 were all crazy negative. He got so many negative comments, but that fed into the algorithm where eventually it flipped over and a lot of people started liking it. And it just shows that sometimes you got to let things mature on that as well. Ashley, you do so many great things. I called it out in the very beginning before I brought you on. You're managing an ample amount of ideas, an ample amount of resources and projects that you have to do, all the way from elections to EOPs to everything else that you're doing in your county. From somebody who has already talked about the many, many things that she has to manage, if you could give some advice to other emergency managers around the country, was one thing that you're very passionate about that you would hope that other people could learn?
Work-life balance. I think that's a big one that I have continued to learn ever since dispatch. Another one is, I feel like in the emergency management community, there is this like a conflicting sense of either you have to be a college-bred individual, that you have to have this amount of education and all these credentials, and or you have to come from the operational world. Um, I, I don't think either is the right way. I think both is the right way. And I've seen some of the comments, and having been that person who had the bachelor's degree, and it came from dispatch, but then was told no, and then eventually became the first female county emergency manager for my county. I proved them all wrong. So it's possible. And I would just say, keep pursuing it and find opportunities to get involved wherever possible. And then also to those in emergency management to not be so closed-minded that you have to have someone with a degree, or you have to have someone who's a police background or fire background or this or that. Be open-minded to find the right person who is the right fit for the team, because people are trainable, and you can get all of that other stuff. You can get the training in there. You can get them to understand operational background, or you're going to get someone with operational background to get the education, or vice versa. I think we just need to stop being so closed-minded and just be more open-minded in general.
I love that. And I think it's a great message for an election day. Honestly, like, there's going to be a lot of people who don't vote for the candidate of choice, and there's going to be a lot of people who have different opinions. But like my friends, I have these two great friends. They're opposite ends of the spectrum, honestly, in some regards, kind of extreme. And I'm this guy in the middle who's going to vote for my wife again. Nobody kill me for that. But, it just goes to show that sometimes especially it feels like now, everything feels polarized. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to, even in standards, like a standard is a guideline, right? Like, and we should create guidelines, but there's always exceptions to the rule. And I have found as a small business or somebody who is a Fed who hired people, the number one indicator for a great person is that they're teachable, right? And the background really doesn't matter, is that they're willing to learn and the rate that they're willing to learn. And pretty good call out there, Ashley. Thank you again so much for coming on the show, for talking with me. I've wanted to do this for some time now. I hope that it inspires other people to, have a little more courage to say, hey, let's try some social media stuff. Let's get out there, not just the social media, but with you and helping out your state and helping out with all your partners, that coordination, collaboration piece that you're so good at. I hope that inspires them as well. So thanks again for coming on the show. All right, now I get to do the cheese part. Everybody who listened to this episode, if you learned something, if you like something, you got to like and subscribe. It's the fastest way we know that you liked it. If you want to go on social media, we post a lot on LinkedIn especially. If you have comments that you'd like to share, if you've done something in this world that we've been talking about, please share your successes. We'd love to hear about it. If you have a specific question for Ashley, you can reach out to us at contact@thereadinesslab.com, and we can forward it on to her. Or I'm sure she's all over LinkedIn as well and different social medias. Also, follow Yavapai OEM. They have great content, and I want to say steal their content, but get inspired by it and share it in your own communities. And we'll see you for the next one. Peace.